The accidental bond. The grand reception hall of the Zalarian embassy sparkled like a sea of stars, its crystal walls refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. Finn Harrison adjusted his diplomatic sash for the 100th time, trying to appear more confident than he felt. As Earth's youngest ambassador to the Zalarian Empire, he couldn't afford to make mistakes at this crucial peace conference. Remember, his mentor's words echoed in his head. The Zalarians value precision and protocol above all else. He weaved through the crowd of various alien dignitaries, nodding politely at the right moments, careful not to make direct eye contact with the towering Andromedans, a gesture they considered hostile. The air hummed with translator devices, converting dozens of languages into a manageable babble. That's when he saw her. Princess Nyxera stood near the central fountain, her iridescent scales shimming with every movement. Unlike the other Zalarians, whose crests were various shades of blue, hers gleamed like liquid silver. She carried herself with a grace that made the other diplomats seem clumsy in comparison. Finn took a deep breath and approached. This was his chance to make a good impression for Earth. Your Highness, he bowed at the precise angle specified in the diplomatic handbook. I bring greetings from Earth. Nyxera turned, her violet eyes widening slightly. Ah, the new human ambassador. Your reputation precedes you. All good things, I hope. Finn smiled, remembering to keep his teeth hidden. Another Zalarian custom. They say you achieved peace between the mining colonies of Mars in record time. Impressive for one so young. Before Finn could respond, a commotion erupted behind him. A drunk Centaurian diplomat stumbled backward, its tentacles flailing wildly. Finn stepped aside to avoid collision, but his shoulder brushed against something smooth and cool. The room fell silent. Finn's blood ran cold as he realized what he touched, Princess Nyxera's sacred crest. The silvery scales along her neck had flared out in surprise, and every Zalarian in the room was staring at him, with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. Do you realize what you've done? Nyxera whispered, her voice a mix of disbelief and something else Finn couldn't quite identify. I apologize, Your Highness. It was completely accidental. I would never presume to. Silence. The royal protector, a massive Zalarian named Threshkar, stepped forward. You have initiated the sacred touch. By our most ancient laws, you have claimed the princess as your mate. Finn's diplomatic training hadn't covered this scenario. There must be some misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding. Nyxera interrupted, her scales now pulsing with a faint blue light. The laws are absolute. You must either complete the bonding ritual or face execution for dishonoring the royal bloodline. The room erupted in chaos. Earth's diplomatic corps scrambled to access their databases, searching for any precedent. The Zalarian Royal Guard formed a circle around Finn and the princess, their ceremonial weapons humming with energy. Your Highness, Finn tried to keep his voice steady. Surely there's a diplomatic solution. Oh, there is, she replied, and Finn was surprised to see a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You can always try to survive the trial of worth. The what now? A sacred combat ritual, Threshkar explained, looking far too pleased. If you survive, you prove yourself worthy of the princess. If you fail, he made a slashing motion across his throat that needed no translation. Finn looked around the room. The other Earth diplomats appeared ready to faint. The Zalarian nobles watched with barely concealed interest. And Princess Nyxera, was she actually amused by all this? How long do I have to prepare? He asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. The moons are aligned now, Nyxera said. The trial begins at dawn. Finn closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Years of diplomatic training, countless hours studying alien customs, and now everything hinged on an accidental touch. When he opened his eyes again, he squared his shoulders and faced the princess. Then I accept the trial. A murmur of approval rippled through the Zalarian nobles. Nyxera's scales flickered with an unexpected pattern of colors, and for a moment, Finn could have sworn she looked impressed. "Well then, Ambassador Harrison," she said, her violet eyes meeting his, "it seems we have a very interesting day ahead of us." Little did Finn know, as the reception hall erupted into preparations for the trial, that this accident would not only change his life, but the fate of 2 civilizations. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that Princess Nyxera's smile held secrets he had yet to discover. Trial by combat. The sacred arena of the Zalarian High Court loomed before Finn like an ancient colosseum crafted from living crystal. Dawn painted the 3 moons of Zealer in shades of purple and gold, their light filtering through the transparent dome above. Finn stood in the preparation chamber, trying to make sense of the ceremonial armor the attendants had given him. "The chest plate goes the other way," a familiar voice said. He turned to find Princess Nyxera watching him from the doorway, her scales catching the early morning light. "I thought it was forbidden for the intended to see each other before the trial," Finn said, remembering one of the many rules Threshkar had barked at him during the night. "It's also forbidden for a human to touch a royal crest, yet here we are." She moved forward, helping him adjust the armor. Her hands were cool against his skin, precise in their movements. "You're taking this remarkably well. Diplomatic training includes keeping a level head in unusual situations." He watched her face carefully. "Though I admit, accidental marriage proposals weren't covered in the manual." "Is that what you think this is? Just an accident?" Her violet eyes met his, and for a moment, Finn forgot to breathe. Before he could respond, a gong resonated through the chamber. Nyxera stepped back, her expression unreadable. "That's your signal. Try not to die, Ambassador. It would be inconvenient." The arena doors opened, revealing a vast circular space surrounded by thousands of Zalarians. The crystalline walls amplified their voices into a deafening roar. Finn walked forward, his boots crunching on the sacred sand that covered the ground. Across the arena stood his opponent, Krafthor, the Empire's most decorated warrior. 8 feet of muscle and scales, wearing armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His ceremonial blade hummed with energy that made the air crackle. "The trial of worth begins," Threshkar's voice boomed across the arena. "Should the human prove victorious, his claim on Princess Nyxera shall be honored. Should he fail..." The crowd roared in anticipation. Krafthor raised his blade in salute. "I have ended 17 challenges. You will be 18. Finn raised his own weapon, a lighter version of the Zalarian blade. "Sorry to disappoint, but I have a diplomatic incident to avoid." The gong sounded again. Krafthor moved with impossible speed for his size, his blade singing through the air. Finn barely managed to dodge, feeling the energy wash over him like a wave of heat. His diplomatic training hadn't prepared him for this, but something else had. Years of zero-gravity combat training required for space station duty. He let muscle memory take over, using Krafthor's momentum against him. The larger warrior's strikes were powerful but predictable, designed to overwhelm rather than outmaneuver. Finn stayed light on his feet, remembering his instructor's words. In Zerog, power means nothing without control. The crowd's roar turned to murmurs of surprise as Finn not only survived, but began to push back. He couldn't match Krafthor's strength, but he didn't need to. Each dodge brought him closer. Each parry led to a quick strike at exposed joints in the warrior's armor. "You fight like water," Krafthor growled, his blade creating arcs of energy with each swing. "No honor in such tactics." "I prefer to think of it as diplomatic problem-solving," Finn replied, ducking under a strike that would have taken his head off. He noticed something then, a pattern in Krafthor's movements, a slight favor to his left side. In the royal box, Nyxera leaned forward, her scales pulsing with colors Finn hadn't seen before. Was that concern? Interest? He couldn't tell, but he was certain of one thing. She wasn't watching this fight like someone who wanted to see him fail. Kravthor launched into his most devastating combination yet, a series of strikes that forced Finn to give ground. The crowd rose to their feet, sensing the end was near. But they had all missed what Finn had seen. The pattern, the weakness, the opportunity. As Kravthor raised his blade for the final blow, Finn moved. Not away, but toward the warrior. He slid under the strike, his own blade finding the gap in Kravthor's armor that he'd been setting up for the entire fight. A quick twist, a flash of energy, and suddenly the massive warrior's blade clattered to the ground. The arena fell silent. Finn stood, his blade pointed at Kravthor's throat. The warrior's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in calculation. This was the moment. By Zellerian law, Finn could end his opponent's life and claim total victory. Instead, he lowered his weapon and offered his hand. Good fight. The silence stretched for another heartbeat before Kravthor threw back his head and laughed, a sound like thunder rolling through the arena. He clasped Finn's arm in the warrior's grip. Perhaps there is honor in water after all. The crowd erupted in cheers. In the royal box, Nyxera stood, her scales blazing with brilliant colors. Freshkar raised his staff. The trial is complete. The human has proven his worth. As attendants rushed forward to help remove his armor, Finn caught Nyxera's eye. She was smiling that mysterious smile again, but now he saw something else in it. Respect, certainly, but also anticipation. "Well done, Ambassador," Freshkar said, approaching with a formal bow. "Though I suspect your troubles are only beginning." "What do you mean?" The royal protector gestured to where nobles were already gathering, their faces alight with political calculation. "You've just proven yourself worthy of the royal bloodline. Now you have to survive the real challenge, the Zellerian court." Finn watched as Princess Nyxera descended from her box, moving with that impossible grace. Around her, he could already see alliances forming and breaking, whispered conversations, and meaningful glances. He had won the trial. But as he looked at Nyxera's approaching figure, he realized Freshkar was right. This was just the beginning. Hidden intentions. The royal archives of Zeller stretched endlessly in every direction, crystal shelves holding millennia of history in shimmering data crystals. Finn sat surrounded by stacks of diplomatic records, trying to make sense of the ancient texts about human-Zellerian relations. 3 days had passed since the trial, and he was no closer to understanding his position in the royal court. "You won't find the answers you seek in there," Nyxera's voice echoed through the archive. She emerged from between the shelves like a ghost, her silver scales dimmed to match the archive's hushed atmosphere. "I thought I might at least find a precedent," Finn replied, setting aside a crystal that detailed the proper way to address a royal consort's third cousin twice removed. Some other unfortunate diplomat who accidentally proposed to royalty. "And have you?" She settled into the chair across from him, her movements liquid smooth. "Unless you count the Proximan ambassador who accidentally married a potted plant." "No." A sound like chimes filled the air. Nyxera's laugh. "You're the first, Ambassador Harrison." Though I'm beginning to suspect. She trailed off, her violet eyes studying him with unsettling intensity. "Suspect what?" Before she could answer, a shadow fell across the table. Freshkar materialized from behind a shelf, his expression grim. "Your Highness, Ambassador, we have a situation." Finn straightened. He'd learned to read the royal protector's tones over the past few days. This one spelled trouble. What kind of situation? The kind that involves 3 dead diplomats and a missing quantum core. Nyxera's scales flickered in alarm. Where? The lower levels of the southern district. The bodies were arranged, ceremonially. Finn's diplomatic instincts kicked in. Like a message. Like a warning, Freshkar corrected. They were positioned to mirror the 3 moons of the ancient bonding ritual. Nyxera stood so quickly her chair skittered backward. "Show me." The southern district was Zeller's technological heart, where ancient crystal architecture met cutting-edge quantum engineering. As they descended in a gravity lift, Finn noticed the usual bustle of the district was eerily absent. Security drones patrolled the streets, their sensors sweeping for threats. The crime scene was cordoned off by an energy field that hummed with lethal potential. 3 bodies lay in a perfect triangle, their positions matching the alignment of Zeller's moons. What struck Finn wasn't just the precision of their placement, but the identity of the victims. An Earth diplomat, a Zellerian noble, and he studied the third body. A quantum keeper, Nix-Era finished, one of our most respected scientists. Finn's mind raced. The missing quantum core, what was its purpose? Threshkar and Nix-Era exchanged looks. Finally, the princess spoke. It was part of the Gateway Project, a joint venture between Earth and Zeller to create stable wormholes between our worlds, which would change everything, Finn realized. Trade, diplomacy, cultural exchange, all of it would be transformed overnight. And some would prefer that transformation never happens. Threshkar's voice was heavy with implication. Nix-Era moved closer to the bodies, her scales rippling with colors Finn had never seen before. Colors of mourning, he realized. This isn't just about the gateway. Look at their positions again. Finn studied the scene. The bodies formed an exact mirror of the 3 moons, but something else caught his eye. Each victim's hands were positioned to point. They're forming an arrow, pointing at the royal palace, Nix-Era confirmed. More specifically, the chamber of bonding. The implications hit Finn like a physical blow. Where we're supposed to complete the bonding ritual in 3 days. It seems someone objects to our union more strongly than we anticipated, Nix-Era said, her voice carefully neutral. Threshkar growled. The traditionalist faction has always opposed closer ties with Earth. A human joining the royal family would seal the alliance permanently, Finn finished, making the Gateway Project unstoppable. He looked at Nix-Era, seeing her in a new light. Her earlier words in the archive took on new meaning. You knew, he said. You knew someone would try to stop this. Her scales flickered with confirmation. I suspected. The timing of the Centaurian diplomats' accident was too convenient. You let me think it was all random chance. Finn wasn't sure whether to be impressed or annoyed. Would you have played your part as convincingly if you'd known the truth? Before Finn could respond, an alarm shattered the air. Threshkar's communicator erupted with urgent messages. The quantum core has been detected, the Royal Protector announced. It's in motion, heading for the upper atmosphere. They're trying to take it off-world, Finn realized. Nix-Era's scales blazed with determination. Not if we stop them first. She turned to Finn. I understand if you want to step back from this. You've already been drawn into more than you bargained for. Finn looked at the bodies, at the message they represented. At the intersection of 2 civilizations' hopes for the future. At the princess who had maneuvered him into position like a master strategist, yet whose eyes now held something that looked remarkably like concern for his answer. With all due respect, Your Highness, he said, straightening his diplomatic sash, I'm already committed to this dance. Shall we? A smile spread across Nix-Era's face, not the carefully measured one she used in court, but something fiercer, more genuine. Then let's go catch some traditionalists. As they raced toward the nearest transport, Finn couldn't help but wonder. In this game of secrets and strategy, was he still the unwitting pawn, or had he somehow become a player? The answer, he suspected, would determine not just his fate, but the future of 2 worlds. Race against time. The orbital lanes above Zeller blazed with pursuit craft, their crystal engines leaving trails of quantum fire across the night sky. Finn gripped the control panel of their interceptor as Nix-Era piloted through the chaos with impossible precision. Remind me again why the Royal Protector isn't handling this chase, Finn asked as they narrowly avoided collision with a cargo hauler. Because, Nix-Era replied, her scales glowing with concentration. Threshkar is busy coordinating the orbital blockade. And because I'm the best pilot in the royal family. You neglected to mention that skill during our diplomatic meetings. Her lips curved in that now familiar mysterious smile. There's a lot I neglected to mention, Ambassador. The stolen quantum core's signature pulsed on their sensors, a bright point of energy heading for the outer rings. Their quarry was a sleek vessel of obvious military design, its hull decorated with ancient Solarian symbols. The Crimson Dawn, Nyxera said, recognizing the markings. They're religious extremists who believe contact with other species dilutes Solarian purity. Charming folks. I assume they're not fans of our impending marriage. They consider it an abomination. She threw the interceptor into a spiral to avoid enemy fire, though I suspect their objections are more political than spiritual. The Crimson Dawn ship dove into Zeller's crystalline rings, using the ancient fragments as cover. Nyxera followed without hesitation, weaving through chunks of crystal the size of buildings. The Gateway Project, Finn said, putting the pieces together. It would make isolation impossible. No wonder they're willing to kill to stop it. The quantum core is only part of their plan. Nyxera's voice was tight with concentration. The murders, the stolen technology. It's all leading to something bigger. A massive crystal shard loomed ahead. Instead of going around, Nyxera aimed straight for a flaw in its structure. Finn's heart leaped into his throat as they shot through the crystal, emerging on the other side just as it shattered. The bonding ceremony, he realized. They're going to try to stop it. Yes, but not just to prevent our marriage. Her scales flickered with urgent patterns. The ceremony itself requires massive quantum energy. With the stolen core, they could turn it into a weapon. The implications made his blood run cold. They could take out the entire royal family, the Earth delegation, and ensure isolation forever. She yanked the controls, bringing them alongside the Crimson Dawn. Not if we stop them first. The enemy ship opened fire, energy beams slicing through space. Nyxera's piloting kept them alive, but they couldn't get close enough to disable the vessel. We need a new plan, Finn said, watching their shields deteriorate. The rings, Nyxera replied. The crystals amplify quantum energy, if we can force them closer. Finn studied the tactical display, his diplomatic mind spinning the scenario in new directions. We don't need to catch them. We need to herd them. Their eyes met in perfect understanding. Nyxera smiled that fierce smile again, and Finn felt something shift in his chest, something that had nothing to do with politics or duty. Working in sync, they used their interceptor to drive the Crimson Dawn deeper into the rings. Each shot they fired wasn't meant to hit, but to guide. The enemy ship, focused on protecting the quantum core, didn't realize they were being maneuvered until it was too late. They emerged into a clearing in the rings, directly in front of Threshkar's waiting fleet. Impressive flying, Your Highness, the Royal Protector's voice crackled over the comm. Though perhaps next time you could avoid destroying several million credits worth of ancient crystal. Bill it to the wedding fund, Nyxera replied dryly. As the Crimson Dawn was surrounded and boarded, Finn turned to the princess. You knew, didn't you? About all of it. The traditionalists, the threat to the Gateway Project. You needed a way to force their hand. I suspected they had infiltrated the diplomatic corps. I needed a catalyst. Her violet eyes met his. Though I didn't expect that catalyst to be quite so competent. Was any of it real? He had to ask. Or was I just a convenient pawn? Nyxera reached out, her cool fingers brushing his cheek in a gesture that sent shivers down his spine. The touch was an accident. Everything after. Let's say I've learned to appreciate the benefits of diplomatic relations. Before Finn could respond, alarms blared through the interceptor. The tactical display lit up with new signatures. Dozens of ships emerging from quantum space. More Crimson Dawn vessels, Threshkar reported. They're on an attack vector for the palace. The ceremony, Finn realized. This was just a diversion. Their real target is still the bonding chamber. Nyxera's scales pulsed with determination. And we're up here while the real threat is down there. Finn looked at the incoming ships, then at the princess who had turned his life upside down, who had manipulated him into position like a master strategist, yet now looked at him with something that might be more than just political calculation. Well, he said, straightening in his seat, we did want a memorable wedding. Nyxera's laugh filled the cockpit as she turned their interceptor toward home. Behind them, the crystal rings of Zalor sparkled like a promise, or perhaps a warning, of things to come. Hearts and worlds. The bonding chamber of the royal palace was a marvel of crystal engineering, its walls thrumming with quantum energy that had been accumulated over millennia. Ancient patterns swirled across its surface, telling the story of every royal union in Zalarian history. Now those same walls shook with weapons fire as the Crimson Dawn launched their assault. Finn crouched behind a fallen column, his diplomatic sash somewhat singed. You know, when I imagined our wedding day, there was less shooting. Beside him, Nyxera fired her quantum pistol with deadly accuracy. Disappointed, Ambassador. On the contrary, this feels oddly appropriate. They had barely made it back to the palace before the attack began. The Crimson Dawn had infiltrators everywhere, guards, servants, even some of the noble houses. Now the grand ceremony had become a battlefield, with loyal Zalarians and Earth security forces fighting side by side against the traditionalists. Threshkar's voice crackled through their communicators. The quantum core is being moved through the lower levels. They're trying to reach the chamber's power matrix. If they succeed, Nyxera said, her scales pulsing with urgency, they can overload the entire system. The explosion would take out half the capital. Finn peeked around the column, analyzing the battlefield with diplomatic precision. They're not just after destruction. They want to make a statement. The humans and Zalarians fighting together, dying together. The perfect propaganda for isolation. Nyxera's violet eyes met his. We need to reach that core. Through about 50 heavily armed fanatics. Having second thoughts about joining the royal family, Finn smiled. Actually, I was thinking this might be a good time to discuss honeymoon plans. Her scales flickered with amusement and something warmer. Survive this, and you can take me anywhere in the galaxy. They moved as one, years of their respective training creating a deadly dance. Finn's zeroed combat experience complemented Nyxera's Royal Guard training perfectly. They fought their way through the chaos, covering each other's blind spots, anticipating each other's moves. The lower levels were a maze of crystal corridors and quantum conduits. They found the core in a ceremonial antechamber, guarded by robed figures led by a familiar face. High Priest Vorkath, Nyxera hissed, the one who blessed our engagement. The elderly Zalarian scales were dull with religious fervor. The bloodline must remain pure. The old ways must be preserved. The old ways. Finn stepped forward. Your ancestors built the Gateway Network. They reached for the stars, formed alliances, grew stronger through diversity. You're not preserving tradition. You're betraying it. A human dares lecture me on Zalarian history. Vorkath sneered. No, Finn replied. A diplomat reminds you of your own greatness. The quantum core pulsed between them, its energy making the air shimmer. Vorkath's followers raised their weapons. The ceremony must not proceed, the high priest declared. The union must not be completed. About that, Nyxera said, her scales suddenly blazing with brilliant light. You might be a little late. She reached out and took Finn's hand. The moment their skin touched, quantum energy surged through the chamber. The walls responded, ancient patterns shifting and swirling. Impossible, Vorkath breathed. The sacred texts speak of true bonding, Nyxera said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. When two souls resonate at the quantum level, we completed our bond the moment we chose each other, not by accident, not by law, but by choice. The chamber's crystals sang with energy, responding to their connected touch. The quantum cores glow synchronized with their joined hands. "It's over, Vorkath," Finn said softly. "The future isn't something you can stop. It's something you have to help shape." For a moment, the High Priest's resolve wavered. Then his face hardened, and he reached for the core. "Then we shall shape it in fire." Everything happened at once. Vorkath's followers opened fire. Threshkar's forces burst through the doors. The quantum core flared with destructive potential. But Finn and Nyxera didn't let go. Their joined energy, amplified by the ancient chamber, reached out to the core. Instead of overloading, it stabilized, its power flowing into the palace's systems. The firefight ended as quickly as it began. Vorkath and his followers were subdued, their weapons useless against the combined might of Earth and Zilarian forces. In the aftermath, as medical teams treated the wounded and security forces led away prisoners, Finn turned to Nyxera. "So, that was interesting." She laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. "Which part? The quantum resonance or the firefight?" "The part where you apparently knew we were genuinely bonded but didn't tell me." I suspected. Her scales rippled with colors he was learning to read. Affection, amusement, and something deeper. "But I wanted you to figure it out for yourself." "Manipulative," he said fondly. "Strategic," she corrected. "I am a princess, after all." Above them, through the crystal dome of the palace, Zeller's 3 moons aligned in perfect harmony. The Gateway Project would proceed, strengthening the bonds between their peoples. The traditionalists would face justice, their fear of change overcome by the promise of a brighter future. "So," Finn said, still holding her hand, "about that honeymoon." Nyxera's scales shimmered with all the colors of possibility. "I hear Earth's quantum lakes are beautiful this time of year." "It's a date," he replied, and as he pulled her close, the crystal walls of the palace sang with the music of 2 hearts beating in perfect quantum resonance. A new pattern in an ancient tapestry, a bridge between worlds, a love story written in the stars.